I'm Traci Austin, your host of the People Strategy Podcast. This show provides interviews with organizational leaders and ongoing coaching experiences that highlight elevating people in organizations through a people strategy roadmap.
Hi, I'm Chad Franzen from Rise 25. Today, I am the host of the People Strategy Podcast, where we dive into the latest trends and best practices in talent management and organizational development. This episode is brought to you by Elevated Talent Consulting, a leading provider of comprehensive talent management solutions. Elevated Talent Consulting was founded on a belief that every individual has a right and a choice to be fulfilled in their work. As leaders, we have an obligation to create space for ourselves and team members to thrive. Creating that space often fails, even with the best intentions, resulting in employee disengagement and missing business outcomes. As you'll hear from Traci, she uses her coaching, consulting, and training experience to serve organizations through the Team Retention Program. Discover how they can transform your workforce at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. Traci Austin is a certified coach and HR professional with over 2 decades of experience bridging the gap between the C-suite and HR leaders in aligning the business strategy to the business results. She is focused on partnering with leaders at all levels to create fulfilling work. This is done by focusing on 4 levers of engagement: fit to role, leadership, team, and cultural alignment to the strategies and core values to meet the business outcomes. She is the chief strategy consultant and owner of Elevated Talent Consulting, a certified women-owned business that partners with leaders in the mid-level manager roles and HR professionals to bridge the gap with both their team and the executive team in exceeding performance expectations while being fulfilled in their work. Traci, thanks so much for having me again today. Really appreciate it. How are you?
I am doing great. And thank you so much for hosting again today. We're talking about appreciation and gratitude and kind of the impact on employee engagement today. And one of the things that you do so well, Chad, is you prepare for these podcast sessions where I think today you came with 35 questions from slide decks from our training programs. And it's like every time we jump on to record one of these, I am just blown away at your dedication to me and our business and just the details and the lens that you see things through that sometimes is so different than what I do. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. This is very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of relevant to everybody, human. So it's relevant. Human resources, human, relevant to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, have you ever taken the 5 languages of appreciation, the MBAI inventory?
I have not.
All right. Well, we'll have to get that for you. Have you taken the 5 love languages?
My wife made me do that, and I forgot.
I
forgot how it turned out. I forgot how it turned out. She didn't make me. We chose to do it. It was her idea.
Right. Right. I love that. Just that language, like she made me. Well, that's so good. The reason why I ask that is that there are different ways that we all like to be appreciated. You and I like, sometimes that words of affirmation and, sometimes it is the, sometimes we, for me, I also like that quality time with a person uninterrupted. You're not on your phone is really important. Sometimes, folks really like that person that's going to stand next to them and help them with a task. Others like the physical touch. I will name at work, we're going to, not do any sexual harassment investigations today. So we're going to keep that one there, but essentially there's these 5 languages of appreciation. And as we talk today about how we impact employee engagement, that is something of really knowing folks, connecting with them for where they are. And just want to shout out Dr. Paul White for writing the book and the spin off of the 5 love languages and being on the podcast. And of course, you can find that in our archives.
Okay, sounds good. So today we're going to talk about appreciation and gratitude impact on employee engagement. Is trust in the workplace kind of built through appreciation and gratitude? And if so, how?
I think that there's definitely a piece of it, and we definitely see that. So, and there's been a ton of research on that, as well. Dr. Paul White talks about the research that they've done. When we think about trust, I'm just going to turn the question around, Chad. When you think about trust, how do you build trust with others?
I usually want them to trust. It's usually more important they trust me, at least initially. So I try to keep my words, like especially initially. I try to undersell and over deliver.
Right.
So I'm not going to tell them I'm here to do a bunch of like walk on water for them. Whatever they see me do is what I do, and hopefully they're thankful, and then they grow to trust me.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, so much of this is also built into, what are our natural behavioral needs? And we can see this within the predictive index as well, where I will trust people immediately. But as soon as you break that trust, you are almost never, ever going to get it back, right? And others, it takes them a long time to trust you. And once they trust you, you're never going to lose that trust. I shouldn't say never, but it's very difficult. And so really understanding how folks tick, whether it's through appreciation, whether it's through gratitude, whether it's through understanding, what their natural behaviors are, that trust is built through actions, right? It's not built through empty words. It's really built through those actions of, can I trust you to do what you say you're going to do? Can I trust you to show up in the way that I need you to show up? And one of those key levers of engagement that we see is the leader leading the individual the way that they need to be led. And so much of that has to do with trust. Are they leading me through this? So if I really need, you to spend some quality time with me, are you doing that? Or are you on your phone every single time we're together?
So why is trust kind of, I know in relationships, trust is important, but in the workspace, why is trust important, and what factor does trust play?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to turn all the questions back around you to take. So I love what you just said. Trust is really important in relationships. And when we look at work, I guess, how do you see work? I guess I see work as a multitude of relationships with our team members, relationships with our supervisors, relationships with our clients, relationships with our, partners, relationships with our contractors, whatever that is. And so all of those are built on relationships. And, if I have a need for recruiting for one of my clients, I have a great relationship with Titus and, Maria and Jonathan and Abraham at Titus. I trust them to get that job done. And they're going to be my first call every single time. And so, that was built both over time and through some collaborative, partnerships that have happened. And I talk to them once a week because they are in with my clients.
Is it important that team members can trust other team members or bosses or managers or whatever to feel comfortable expressing themselves? To be able to feel comfortable expressing themselves?
Absolutely. And so, again, I'm just going to turn the question back around. If you feel like you can't share something that is important to you, what ends up happening?
I probably would just hold it in, and then it would fester painfully inside of me.
Right. And then we start resenting and we start not giving as much at work because we're frustrated because we don't think we're appreciated back. And we just start this negative spiral. And so within that, this open communication and conversation becomes really important. And do I trust that if I bring something forward, one, I'll be listened to, but two, there's enough curiosity there to be able to see from where I'm sitting what I see.
So what specific strategies can managers implement to create a psychologically safe environment where team members can feel comfortable expressing themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ones that I've used in several different training programs, Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard talks about how you can build, psychological safety. And she has an exercise that she does where she brings a team together and asks these 4 questions that they're really getting to know each other and honestly answering these questions. And the first one is, what can we count on each other for? So Chad, I can count on you to show up with questions ready and be able to collaborate with me to create these podcasts, and then the second question is, what is the team relationship? I don't know about you, but I've been a part of teams that are phenomenal to work together. And I've also been a part of teams where I feel like they're giving the bare minimum and undermining everything that I do. Have you noticed that as well?
Definitely.
And so when we can, throw that out to the team and say, hey, what is the relationship as a team? And what do we want that to be? Then we can start to talk about what is the reputation we aspire to have within the team? What are those relationships we want to have with each other? How do we want this to feel? Do we want work to feel hard and negative and like I'm being undermined? Or do we want work to feel like, hey, I've just turned up Chad's strengths. And you know what? Chad's also turned up my strengths, so I don't have to do the details because he's going to take care of them. And that makes both of us better. And then the fourth question is, what do we need to do differently to achieve the reputation for our team and fulfill our purpose as a team? And so those four questions really start to build the psychological safety, because guess what? We've put things out in the open now. We've built trust with each other in being honest and vulnerable on what's happening. And now we're going to continue to follow that up within our day-to-day actions and conversations.
So I've worked in organizations where there's definitely trust and psychological safety. But is that something that can be quantified? Like how can organizations measure and track improvements in psychological safety and trust over time?
Yeah, there's a number of surveys out there that you can do it, and I will say, I use a couple different survey tools for that. Predictive index is one of them. And, you can measure it through engagement. Here's the thing, ask the questions, and so have folks tell you what that is. Yes, you can start to see it through work outputs and outcomes. But I can never tell you, Chad, how you're feeling today. Only you can name that. And I need to be able to trust that's the truth that you're telling me, right? And so what I love about employee engagement surveys or climate surveys is we can start to see where the needle gets moved. And the results of those employee engagement surveys, we then can sit down with the different teams and say, all right, how do we want to start to implement some of these things? Or what are those key things that we want to change in order to increase that employee engagement? And I want to bring this back to gratitude and appreciation for a minute, because let me ask you this question, Chad. When you're fully listened to, do you feel appreciated?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Leaders can have the best intentions and they think they're building a great culture, but is there some maybe things that are unintentional, maybe some pitfalls or mistakes that a leader can make that would erode trust, even, when they're trying to do the right thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of this, I think, is sometimes cultural. Each of us grew up in a very specific way. We, had different levels of education. We grew up around different people in different parts of the country. And there's times where we may take something and go, oh, that didn't feel good at all. And I can't believe they just said that. Whereas for that person, they don't have the cultural competency to really go, oh, that was actually a degrading remark to that individual. Jenny Mobius was on my podcast. It was right after COVID. And one of the things that we were talking about is, how do we talent pathway plan for females in a hybrid world? And really that distinction between what one group versus another group may see. And, that's one that I definitely see so often is as leaders, we're doing the best we can with what we know how. Yet, if we haven't created a safe space for individuals to share how things have shown up for them, it starts to erode that trust, and it starts to have folks kind of start to pull back and become disengaged in the work environment, and they're not feeling appreciated by their team and or their supervisor.
What is self-betrayal in this context, and how can that impact trust building efforts within teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So as leaders, self-betrayal is one of those where I'm going to define it as I'm doing things that are actually hurting myself, not realizing that they are, right? So a really great example of this would be, hey, I say I'm going to do something by a certain point in time, and then I don't do it. Well, why don't I do it? Well, it could be I overcommitted to it. Or it could be that, hey, I didn't want to name, we were scheduled for an hour. We're at the end of that hour. I've got another appointment, so I need to step out. So it's things like that where we are not choosing to take the actions to follow what our word is. That's one example of that. Another example of that may be that we actually do not set our team up to be successful by having clarity in what we're delegating to them.
What can be done to kind of address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one of the key things within that is self-awareness. Really, it's being aware of, all right, if I say uh-huh to something, I actually made a promise, right? So am I willing to look at every yes, uh-huh, okay as a promise? That's one thing that we can do because so often we say yes to something, at least in my experience, because I want the easy way and I just want them to stop bothering me. Right.
Sure.
And guess what? Our employees do that too. So, one of the key ways that we can do that is just ask the question, hey, are you willing to do X by this time? Because to me, that's a promise. And I feel, and in my experience, when I shift those words to a promise, it's like, oh, I actually am making a promise within that. And now we have clarity over what we're actually agreeing to because we have what it specifically is, and we have a by when to it. And then we have the follow up commitment from that person and ourselves.
How can clearly communicating expectations contribute to building trust? And how do you recommend doing this?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of kind of what I just said within that clear communication. And so often when we agree to something, you may have a very different definition of that than I do, right? I may say, hey, Chad, can we do a podcast next week? And you're like, sure. I have this vision in my head that we're going to do a 60-minute podcast. It's going to cover all these topics. And you're thinking it's going to be a 5-minute podcast because we have not shared the information. What's going to be covered in it? How long is it going to be? We're going to record it right then, right? So it's clearly defining the expectations of each party within that and what the by when of that is. And what happens is through those conversations, we're starting to build trust because we have defined what that agreement is between the two of us to get a very specific outcome.
In our team retention series, we talked about mission, vision, and values. How can that impact appreciation and gratitude?
Yeah, absolutely. So mission, vision, and values are in an organization that's really looking at why are we doing what we're doing, right? And you, in your intro today at Elevated Talent Consulting, we believe that every individual has a right and a choice to be fulfilled in their work. And as leaders, we have an obligation to create that container. So when we look at that, any individual on our team has to be committed to working with leaders to create that container, which means we have to be willing to have the accountability conversations when we see something where an individual is not willing to do that, right? We also do that when we bring new clients in. We're really looking at what is their mission and vision, and are they willing to take these steps to get the outcomes? Because if that's a misalignment, we're not going to be a great contractor for them. And so that's a little bit of how, we look at that. And again, when you're looking at that with your team and hiring team members in, it is having enough appreciation for them to know if they're not going to be a fit within your culture, we're going to name that so that they can go find that right fit. Because I don't know about you, but I've definitely worked in environments where I was not aligned from where I stood with the culture of the organization. And it didn't turn out well for anyone. I hated life. They didn't think that I was great. And guess what? Both of those things were fine, but we could have had that conversation up front to say, here's how we work. And I could have said, that's not going to work for me. And that really starts to build that trust. And I will also name, I'm so grateful for those candid conversations that I've had with folks over the years to really define what that is and if this is a fit or not.
Is it important up front to have kind of a conversation like accountability is part of our culture here? It's just kind of, don't take it personally. It's just a way to make me improve, make you improve, make everybody improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will name is if I say, hey, Chad, is accountability important to you in an interview? You're going to say yes, right? And so the key here, especially when we're working with our people leaders that are managing departments, we're really working with them on crafting questions for the interview to show how they're accountable to themselves and their team. So one example may be, hey, tell me a little bit about, a project that you were on that maybe increased your profitability, right? Or whatever that is. And then we're really digging in. Great. So what were you responsible for? What was your specific role in that? Who were the other players on the team? What were they responsible for? How did the two of you really work, or the three or four of you really work together? Who held what role in that? And what you're starting to get into is one, how they're working together as a team, but two, are they taking credit for things that they shouldn't be taking credit for? And are they also at times needing to hold themselves and others accountable? And within those interview questions, I always love to add, so how did you show the appreciation to, Chad within that specific context of that project? Because I want to hear if they're going to take credit for it or what they actually did, because that's going to tell me if they're going to be aligned with our culture or not.
So how can accountability kind of help create desired business outcomes?
Yeah. So I think for everything, if we don't have accountability within what's happening, we just don't hit the goals, right? And so when we look at, even that question that I just asked or that scenario about an interview guide, guess what? We're really looking to see what the accountability was to hit the business objectives and the by when. Did you hit the deadline? Yes. So, okay, tell me more about how you actually hit it, not just in we got a report done, but what was the outcome of that? What was the outcome of that on the team? What was the outcome of that specifically on the rest of the organization or the client?
I think when you're tasked with doing something and you have to kind of depend on other people to assist you or whatever, it's easy to kind of just view them as people who are there to assist you rather than seeing them as just people. How does the kind of the concept of seeing employees as people versus maybe objects or somebody who's just there to assist you impact employee engagement?
Are we going back to like the Henry Ford days of like, you're here on the line to get this thing done so that we can move this forward, right?
Yeah,
the
exactly.
cog in the wheel versus kind of that person, right? Here's the deal. We're all humans. Every single one of us has desires. We want to make an impact. We want to be appreciated in the way that we want to be appreciated. We, want to go home to our family. We want to have fun. We want to do all those things, right? And, when we can really see people as people and get to know them the way that they want to be known, that's really one of those ways that we start to build trust, but also feel appreciated. I've had leaders over the years that really have taken the time to sit down with me and help me understand, right? And I've had other leaders are like, well, just get this thing done by, this time period, or they'll say, it's 4:00 on a Wednesday and I've got kiddos that have baseball games at 5:00. Hey, Traci, this thing just came in. It needs to be done tonight. You can't leave until it's done. And I'm going, my biggest commitment and why I'm in here right now is for my kids. And you just threw this on my plate an hour before I meant to leave. So you're seeing me as an object versus as a mom, as, a professional, as, all of who I am as a human. What happens over time is it starts chipping away. And am I going to do everything I can to support that leader? Probably not. Now, the leader that says, hey, Traci, this just came in. I know it's 4:00 on a Wednesday. I actually just had a conversation with this client that said that this was an unreasonable expectation and we're going to get it to them by Friday at noon. Because I know what's most important to you right now is that you're at that baseball game at 5:00. That leader had my back. And am I going to put in the extra time to get it done before noon on Friday? More than likely, yes.
Yeah, I think learning about people like that also helps you kind of understand their behavioral drives. How can kind of understanding individual behavioral drives help in aligning with organizational goals?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a ton about this, right? Like with predictive index and what that specifically looks like. And, trust is one of those big things. Are we going to trust somebody immediately, or is it going to take time to trust, which I know we talked about earlier in the podcast? But when we can understand how people tick, now we know how to lead them. And when we know how to lead them, now we know who we need to bring on the team to really turn up their strengths. And that is really showing the appreciation for them as well. Earlier in our conversation today, we talked about psychological safety, and we talked about kind of those 4 questions. And, within that, we're building trust, and we're also getting to know what's really important to that individual so that, hey, the reputation of the team is really important to say, hey, we are a team that counts on each other, that has each other's back, and we will hit the business outcomes because we're doing this together versus undermining each other to actually get there.
So how does the concept of building trust and rapport align with your overall vision for HR leadership in the organization?
Absolutely. So, building trust, I feel like we've talked about throughout our entire conversation. We build trust with folks by meeting them where they're at, by understanding what is important to them. And rapport is a key part of that. Rapport is, hey, how are we going to collaborate together? What does that look like? So for HR leaders, one of those key things that's important is that we're building that trust and rapport with our people leaders and those line level managers. And it's one of the key things that we talk about throughout the team retention program, because the manager, that people leader, has the strongest relationship, can have, if they choose to, the strongest relationship with the individuals on their team. HR is really there to partner with those people leaders to support them in a way to elevate into that, and to support through what some of those global policies are, but really to listen into what do they need to really support them to create the best team and have that to meet those business outcomes.
So it's been another interesting and informative episode. As we kind of wrap things up here, you work with a number of clients and leaders, individual leaders who are growing in their roles. What do you see or notice when people are appreciated the way that they need to be appreciated?
Absolutely. And it's engagement. If someone feels appreciated, they're going to do so much more for that leader. I had a conversation on the podcast a couple of years ago with Katie Wheelock. Katie was one of my first hires at a nonprofit organization. And, in this podcast episode, we really talk about appreciation and how we build that appreciation in to the structure of the organization. But one of the things within that is, again, Katie talks about, hey, Traci, you really made me feel appreciated in this way. And I've taken it and I've implemented it into every single leadership role that I've held since then. And that's one of those is we have such a ripple effect on others. So when someone truly feels appreciated, more than likely, that's going to be passed on again and again and again. And that's a gift.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that is our podcast on appreciation and gratitude impact on employee engagement. Any final thoughts?
I just, again, want to say thank you so much for listening. And I would love your gratitude with the 5-star reviews and sharing what you really appreciate about these podcasts and potentially how they've impacted your work environment.
Okay, awesome. Hey, thanks so much for having me today, Traci. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Have a great day.
You too. So long, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.